I did a video on the Tribit Maxsound Plus. I really like this speaker. I do like this speaker. Well, apparently Tribit saw my video and liked it so much they said, would you like to try the other speakers we've got and compare them all in one video? And if you do that, we'll send them to you for nothing. So I had to think about it for about 2 seconds and I said, yes, that would be nice. Send me some free speakers. So just to say, I've got these speakers for nothing, although I did pay for the Maxsound Plus. They have no input in my review. It's my honest opinions on these speakers. They just said, we'll send you them if you do one video comparing them all so people understand the differences. So that's exactly what I'm going to do in this video. I am going to play some sound clips, but I am going to describe all the differences between these speakers. I got the Maxsound Plus because that was the one that interested me, watching other people's videos on the speaker and listening to opinions. I did get the Earphone U-Boom straight after this because apparently it has the same drivers and people saying, yep, it sounds as good or better. I was a little bit disappointed with the Earphone U-Boom, which of course is a 360-degree speaker. So first of all, one of the differences between the three speakers that I've got here, which I should say are, I've got the Tribit Stormbox, I've got the Trbit Maxboom, and I've also got the Tribit Xboom. Yes, they are the same speaker. So if you was confused like I was, the Stormbox, the Maxboom and the Xboom are the same speaker. Apparently they've just had to change the name because it was getting confused with other brands, and indeed maybe their own brand where they had the Maxsound and the Maxboom. I don't know, but yes, they are simply changing the name at the moment. I see in the UK they're still calling this the Maxboom. In fact, it comes in a box that says Maxboom, but I believe on their website they're still advertising it as the Stormbox. I assume Stormbox will be the new name. I don't know. In fact, there was something I forget in one of these boxes apologising for the confusion over the naming. Let me see if I've left it in. Yeah, here we are. Thank you for choosing Trbit Maxboom. Originally Xboom, this product was renamed Maxboom. So nothing about Stormbox there. So I'm calling it Stormbox because I think on the website the newest name is Stormbox. Just to say, if you're confused, it's the same exact speaker. So this is the 360-degree speaker. Of course, when they loosely talk about all these 360-degree speakers, well, they've got speakers, they've got drivers all around, but of course 360 is not going to sound exactly the same on each side of the speaker. For instance, on the Stormbox, we have on the left side a driver that's positioned at the top end. If you go by the plus, at the top end of the speaker. On the other side, we have a driver that's in the middle. I think this top one is because the battery is located there. So a driver there, a driver there. Passive radiators either side. So a bit different from some of the 360-degree speakers where the passive radiators will also be outside. The point being, if you have it upright, of course you are standing on one of the passive radiators. But there are many ways to listen, but it's going to sound a little bit different on each side. We've got the Xsound Go. So it is a little sweet, cute little speaker. Drivers either side and a little passive radiator in the middle. This is the cheapest of the bunch, and of course the Maxsound Plus, which I already had, really like. Passive radiator front and back, drivers either side. Now, in terms of features, one of the features they talk about is the lanyard. Yes, it's the little thing, the little cord that you can hang the speaker by. You get a cord with the Stormbox, you get a cord with the Xsound Go, and you can have a cord also, although I haven't got it on here, with the Maxsound Plus. So they all have that in common. What they don't have in common is there's an X bass on the Maxsound Plus, there's an X bass button on the Stormbox, but there isn't one on this little sweet little speaker. So it's a no fuss speaker. You do have your volume up and down controls, your play button. Of course, there's no app to go with any of these speakers, I should point out. And in terms of X bass, it doesn't work quite the same on either of the Stormbox on the Maxsound Plus, because X bass on here is more like a normal bass, and if you turn it off, it's like a bass cut, whereas it's like a bass boost on the Stormbox and then a normal bass if you turn X bass off. The major difference, and you probably have already gathered by the fact I've got two Stormboxes, the big difference is true wireless stereo pairing with the Stormboxes, up to a maximum of 2 speakers, by the way. They talk about wireless chaining, but it's still a maximum 2 speakers that you can connect together, whereas you can't connect 2 Maxsound Pluses, you can't connect 2 Xsound Goes. And just to run through all the features before I forget anything, I should point out in terms of prices, I just checked as I did this video this morning on Amazon. It's just £24 for the Xsound Go, £32, which I must say, yeah, sounds an absolute bargain on the Maxsound Plus. £55, a bit more of a premium on the Stormbox. Obviously you've got stereo pairing where you haven't got on the other two. So just to quickly go over the features, I don't want to forget anything. In terms of batteries, the Maxsound Plus and the Stormbox both pull 7.4 volts and rated 2,200 milliamp battery on the Maxsound Plus. Now this, from the specs that it's saying, 2,600 milliamp hours on the Stormbox. I'm not sure if that's correct or not, because you've also got a 3.7 volt, 4,400 milliamp hour battery on the Xsound Go. I wonder if that's really 2,600 or it's really 2,200. But in terms of 3.7 volt equivalents, you're talking 4,400, 5,200, 4,400. I don't know if that's correct or not. It sounds to me like maybe it's actually the 4,400, because then it would all be the same batteries. Of course, they're all, you know, we're all talking budget speakers. They're both running SBC codecs, so no fancy codecs in terms of Bluetooth. They're all running Bluetooth 4.2, only stereo pairing on Stormboxes. They are all micro USB charging, so no USB-C on these. They are budget speakers. They all have an auxiliary input. So these days on many devices, they're dropping auxiliary inputs, outputs. You still get your auxiliary input. In terms of power, rated 24 watts, rated 24 watts, rated 12 watts on the little Xsound Go. In terms of charging, you've got a full 2 amps, 5 volts on the Stormbox, 1.5 amps rated for the Maxsound Plus, just 1 amp rated on the Xsound Go. So it's going to take a little while to charge compared to the other speakers. In terms of weight, obviously this is a lot lighter at 380 grams. 595 grams is actually a little bit heavier than the Stormbox is the Maxsound Plus. So there's a bit more going on there. It's a little bit heavier. They are all IPX7 rated. It means you can drop it up to 1 meter of water for 30 minutes and it should be absolutely fine. We've got 2 40mm drivers and 1 passive radiator on the Xsound Go. We've got 2 45mm drivers on both the Stormbox and the Maxsound Plus. So I assume they're the same drivers. 2 passive radiators on the Stormbox and the Maxsound Plus. But of course, they're different passive radiators. So we've got JBL style passive radiators on the Stormbox, but looks to me more oval shaped front and back on the Maxsound Plus. I did test battery life on all of them. On my personal testing, I got at maximum volume 4 hours 46 minutes on the Xsound Go, 2 hours 56 minutes on the Stormbox, and 3 hours so basically 3 hours on both the Maxsound Plus and the Stormbox, again suggesting they actually are the same battery, which would be a couple of 2,200 milliamp hour batteries. So that's the headlines, that's the difference. Get an idea on how each of them sounds, starting with the Maxsound Plus, which I have already done a video on, just to quickly go over what to expect from the frequency response. It is a remarkably flat frequency response, all the way up to 20 kilohertz. Now that is remarkable. We are talking about 66 hertz to 20 kilohertz within plus or minus 3 decibels, basically flat. So basically from around here, 66 hertz, it's within plus or minus 3 decibels all the way along. But that's with extra bass on. It's not flat if you don't have extra bass on. With extra bass on, it's remarkably flat, remarkably neutral. The Stormbox, the Maxboom, the Xboom. So first of all, the driver that is at the top of the Stormbox in brown, the driver which is midway between top and bottom is in black. I've tried the same test on both of my 2 Stormboxes with the same result. The top driver at 60%, some 3 decibels higher, around 14 kilohertz. So given that I'm looking for the most balanced sound, just say that my following tests are with the mid driver. If you want a heavily boosted 14 kilohertz sound, listen to the top driver face on. So X bass on versus X bass off. The difference, listening front on, that means the drivers firing to the left and right, the passive radiators on the bottom and the top. Front on, X bass on, X bass off. At 60%, we're talking a 7 decibel bass lift. So it is a bass lift. It's not that without X bass on, you've got to cut. It's quite balanced with X bass off. But with X bass on, it's a proper bass boost. Significant, about 7 decibels. And it's boosting from 200 hertz up. Front on, play sideways. The mid driver facing you, X bass on, X bass off. It's the same result. Boosting from 200 hertz upwards, and then its peaks 7 decibels louder in the bass. It's bass heavy with X bass on. Side on, the mid driver facing you, same result. X bass on. Compared to X bass off, it's very bass heavy. It's giving about a 7 decibel lift at the bass peak, but it's quite balanced with X bass off. So in search of the most balanced way to listen, for me, it means X bass off. Of course, if you like bass, you're going to put the X bass on. Just saying, for me, looking for a balanced sound, front on, drivers facing left and right, lengthways, mid driver facing me, and side on with the mid driver. So the most balanced there is clearly lengthways. Obviously, it's getting the benefit of being in much more contact with a larger piece of the surface that you have it on. So front on, considerable dip between 3 and 14 kilohertz. Lengthways quite balanced, almost within plus or minus 3 decibels. It's actually about plus or minus 3.5 decibels. It's peaking around 80 and dipping to about 73. So within that range, given that this is a 360 degree speaker, to be that flat from about just over 60 hertz, 63ish hertz, all the way up to 20 kilohertz. Pretty handy really, given that his budget as well, and a 360 degree so-called speaker, almost within plus or minus 3 decibels. Whereas with side-on mid-driver, it's more, you're talking plus or minus 4 decibels. It's still reasonably balanced, but a bit more in the way of peaks and dips. Cute little Xsound Go. So right from low volume, 7%, we can see what we're going to hear all the way through. 3000 hertz bump. It's going to give it a hell of a lot of clarity, albeit slightly bright, thin sounding, because there's no real bass. Although weirdly at 7%, we appear to have some lower bass. What we do get is the upper bass, so around 150 hertz. So it's going to give it a kind of thin thump. And it's going to be like that all the way up. The upper bass is going to increase along with that 3000 hertz peak all the way up. There isn't going to be much change. There's not a lot to roll off. So it does mean it plays pretty nice at maximum volume in terms of the sound not changing that much. We look at that 150 hertz mark, 87 dB, 84, it's not rolling off. It is there consistently all the way through the volume scale. One thing this speaker does do is play at low volume pretty clear. I compare that to the Maxsound Plus. First thing you'll notice, minimum volume peaking at 57 on the Maxsound Plus, peaking around 54, 3 decibels quieter on the Xsound Go. Obviously, it's a little speaker, it's going to play quieter. However, it plays quieter and clear. If you're looking for something late at night, make vocals very clear, but at very low volume, it's going to do the job. There's some weird thing going on where you can see lower bass around the 50 dB. It's actually a bit more I'm getting on the Maxsound Plus. However, it's not there very long as you go up the volume scale on the Xsound Go. So the Stormbox, clearly going to have several more options in how you use it, not least because you can also have it lengthways, almost JBL style, passive radiators either side, a driver facing forward, a driver facing to the rear. So there are many ways you can listen to that, including, which you can't do with all 360 degree speakers, put it on its side. So it sounds most, well, in terms of actual test tone measurements, it appears the most balanced way to listen to this speaker is on its side with the mid driver, which is the right driver, with the mid driver facing you. If you're actually going to listen to it from one angle, of course it's a 360 degree speaker, that's the point, but if you want to have the most balanced way, that's going to be on its side face on. If you want to listen to it in its most brightest form, it's going to be upright with the top driver facing you. So what does that actually sound like in reality? So we've got a handle on each of these speakers. We've got the specs, we've got the frequency response. We know kind of what to expect, but it's never quite the same when you actually hit it with a real track. So let's have a comparison with all of them. Now I am trying to volume match, which means I'm playing 60%, 53%, 47%, and then normalizing. I'm trying to get them as evenly sounding as possible.
I'm on my own, broken alone. I feel the rain crashing down all around this empty town. I'm searching for the lost and found, but you don't care, you're unaware. Keep moving like the scars aren't even there. It's in the air like a blazing flare. Don't stare 'cause the flames will burn us. I thought you were the one for me. That's why I gave you everything. Held you close by the stormy seas. Oh, you meant the world to me. I used to kiss your head when you cried for me. Hold your hand while the pain was over. Keep you warm by the roaring sea. Oh, you meant the world to me. Like a shadow. I can't wait to leave this town, 'cause lately I've been feeling down. The cold nights just don't feel the same. Oh, like my life inside a car. Hit the button, drive real far. But that record only died. Fight in the dark till we see the sunlight. My love, it's you.
the Maxsound Plus, Stormbox, face on, X bass off, X bass on, and the Xsound Go. The first thing you can see is the Xsound Go. Well, there's no pretense of bass there at all. So it's rolling off from 200 Hz. The Maxsound Plus, of course, is designed to be listened face on, and I'm recording face on. It's always going to get an advantage, but it is the most balanced. I'm using X bass on because without X bass on, it's more like a bass cut. Unlike the Stormbox, where X bass off is a normal bass, X bass on is a proper boosted bass, to the point where I'm getting 5.5 decibels more on the bass. When I tried to balance them for perceived sound, even more bass than the Maxsound Plus. With the Maxsound Plus clearer on the Stormbox, I've still got this dip in the high end. Maxsound Plus a bit more rounded, and the Xsound Go, well, it's very clear, it's very bright. It's smaller than the others, it's got half the power. But at the same perceived loudness, it's going to be quite a brittle sound in comparison. But if clarity is what you're after, you'll certainly get it with the Xsound Go. Right, so of course, the Stormbox is the only one of the three that supports stereo pairing. So what is the difference if you have one or two? Is it worth getting the second one?
Breathe you in like oxygen. Oh, in an otherwise suffocating world, I'm reaching out for arms, I'm drowning in the open-ended love we're making, girl. Exhale the past, inhale the future that lasts. Change my heart, change my mind for the last time. Wanna believe in the life I've led. I don't wanna leave another word unsaid. You know my heart will follow you in tomorrow. In tomorrow. Holding on to memories that we shared. My evidence you once really cared.
So, as always, with most speakers, I don't think I've come across one speaker yet that doesn't sound a lot better having two rather than one. Although, of course, you are paying double the money. But if you're buying it for the stereo pairing and 360-degree listening, yeah, it is going to be a little bit more bass heavy. It is going to sound a little bit more open when you have a pair of them. So, for me, the real test, push them to the limit. So a test of all of them at maximum volume and not adjusting anything afterwards. They all play exactly as you would hear the difference as if you were standing or sitting directly in front of these speakers. I'm going to throw the Flip 5 into this mix because I do think it's in some ways similar to the Stormbox and the Maxsound Plus in size, albeit twice the price. So I think it's going to be a question you're going to want to know. How does the Flip 5, the Maxsound Stormbox, compared to the twice the price Flip 5?
Way easy. I never thought you'd be the one. I never meant to take your heart. I never felt so hard. I never meant to be the one. I never thought I'd break your heart. You and me, we both live life at full speed. Easy to see when we collide. No one walks away easy.
So remember, average RMS, it's the total power throughout the frequency range. For me, that's the real figure of one speaker being louder than the other. However, the peak, instantaneous, loudest any one speaker will go, the sort of noise that will burst your eardrums if you're not careful. For some people, that's the figure they prefer. Taking average RMS, Maxsound Plus is louder than the Flip 5, twice the price, although the peak on the Flip 5 is louder. The peak on the Flip 5 is the upper bass, so it has more upper bass and a tiny bit more around the 77-78 Hz mark than the Maxsound Plus, but overall, because the Flip 5 drops away, the Maxsound Plus is louder. To my ears, Maxsound Plus is more balanced, albeit this is at maximum volume, followed by the Stormboxes. Now, in stereo, X bass off is louder than X bass on. Yes, X bass off has less bass than X bass on, but when you turn X bass on, you're losing more of the mids and the highs. So overall, there's more power coming from the Stormbox with X bass off. Remember, this is face on. And then the surprise package, the Xsound Go, it might not have the bass as the others, but it retains everything. So while the others have a bass that's rolling off, there is no bass to roll off. In relative terms, on the Xsound Go, it goes loud and clear. It actually sounds pretty decent at maximum volume. It was a surprise to me. So forget the bass, minus 37.1. It's 10 plus decibels down on all the other speakers, but it's retaining all of its frequency range. On average, minus 24. That's less than a decibel down than the Stormboxes. In stereo, a pair of them. I thought this was quite an amazing result. Remember, with the Stormbox, you're losing a lot of the sound up and down with the passive bass radiators to the sides. Nothing's actually firing at you when I'm playing them face on. So it's always going to sound a little bit more muffled and a little bit less loud than it probably will do in reality as you walk around it. It's a 360-degree speaker. Then the Stormbox's X bass off again, louder than the X bass on. It's just that you do get a little bit more bass, and as soon as you get a little bit more bass, you get a roll off in the rest of the frequency range. But minus 26.2, minus 25.9, behind by nearly 2 decibels. That little 12-watt Xsound Go. So of course, it's a bit unfair. I'm playing the Stormbox face on. Why? Because I think, although I'm saying it sounds more balanced on its side with one driver facing you, in reality, if you are going to just sit in front of it, you do want the stereo. You're missing the stereo. You've got one driver firing completely away from you. If you want to get some sort of stereo, some bit more immersive in the speaker, you're going to have it face on. Of course, you're going to lose some high end when you do that. Now, the point is, it's a 360-degree speaker. It's a bit unfair comparing it with something that's pretty awesome for the money, the Maxsound Plus. When I have it face on, and really it's an all-round speaker. So just to hammer home that point, here is the difference. If you weren't sitting right in front of it, if you are just trying to walk around a room and have the speaker in the middle of the room, what is the difference if you went for a proper 360 like the Stormbox versus the Maxsound Plus? So that's when there's a big difference, and that is when you've got to decide, how am I going to listen to it? Is it worth paying a bit more for the Stormbox? Am I going to listen to it face on, or am I going to be walking all around and not get the benefit of how it sounds when it's great face on? That's when the Stormbox really comes into its own. Not least also, of course, you've got the stereo pairing. Now, you will notice the maximum volume test is not quite the same as at low volumes. When I keep saying, when I was having to adjust like 2 different volume steps on the Xsound Go compared to the other 2 speakers, because it plays noticeably quieter at each volume step. However, there wasn't much difference when I got to maximum volume. It really surprised me. I wanted to look into that a bit deeper. I measured it at each volume step. So having said earlier, the Xsound Go plays noticeably louder at each volume step than the other 2 Tribit speakers. So much so that when I did my 60% test, I had to play it a couple of steps louder than the other 2 speakers. I was surprised how well it's doing at maximum volume, given that it was much quieter lower down the volume scale. I wanted to see what was going on. I've looked at it a bit closer. At each volume step, I've taken the maximum RMS, put it onto a chart, and as you can see, for most of the volume scale, the Xsound Go is up to 6 decibels quieter than the Maxsound Plus or the Stormbox. Even quieter, up to 8 decibels quieter than the Flip 5. But by the time you get to maximum volume, it's almost right up there with the Stormbox, and it's only 3 decibels behind the Flip 5. It's only the Maxsound Plus of all of these speakers that almost keeps that difference right up to volume scale. So as you can see, as you hit around 85%, the Xsound Go is still getting louder in a linear way as you got the volume scale. The Flip 5, from just after 90%, there's basically no more volume, even when you go to 100%. The Stormbox, again, it's rolling off in its volume scale from around 85%. It's not linear after that. So the Xsound Go, linear all the way up the volume scale. The Maxsound Plus, almost linear all the way up this volume scale. The Flip 5, the Stormbox, there is not much more volume after you've hit 90%. This is why, when you're doing these tests, volume matching, sound pressure level matching is an absolute must. Because when you play these speakers in the real world, you're getting the volume that your ears want. You're not hitting a particular volume step. So if you only compared these speakers at the same volume, lower down the volume scale, it slants the actual reality of what you would hear sitting in front of the speaker and adjusting the volume to your own ears in your own room. So there is one of the things why you have to adjust to your ears rather than just go by volume steps, because the Stormbox and the Flip 5 are rolling off the volume. So they have an advantage, you know, when you hear people do A-B comparisons, especially when they're playing at the same volume, would appear to have a bit more of an advantage because they're sticking more of the volume down the scale. Whereas the Maxsound Plus and the Xsound Go, perfectly linear all the way up. So they really come into their own, volume matched all at maximum. That's when you hear the difference. And I was surprised how little difference. Obviously, you're not getting any bass. But in terms of clear sound, and at maximum volume, it was still a decent listen. A lot of these speakers, by the time you've hit maximum volume, it's a bit hard on the ears. You've got hardly any of the sound left. But this is still quite balanced outside of that, you know, below 150 hertz. So, you know, late night, if you know, especially if you listen to podcasts or something and you only really want to hear some of the vocals, I think, you know, then it's a great speaker. It'll play quieter than the other speakers with a hell of a lot of clarity. It's not just quiet, but the clarity is there because of the way it has been tuned. So, X-Bass is a proper boost, 3 to 7 decibels on the Stormbox when you hit X-Bass, but you do lose some of that high end. X-Bass on the Maxsound Plus is really a bass cut when you don't have it on, and it's like a nicely balanced bass when you have it on with the Maxsound Plus. There is no X-Bass on the Tribit. It's all about clarity, as long as you don't want any actual lower mid bass. For me, the star of the show is the Maxsound Plus. It's especially at the moment, 30 odd quid at the moment on Amazon UK. It sounds very nice. It sounds very balanced and extends all the way up to 20 hertz. But there is something different with each of the Tribit speakers. They asked me to point out the differences. I think I've pointed out all the differences. I'm still going to say, for my money, as long as you're going to listen to it just face on, the Maxsound Plus is the standout star of the show. You know, I do really like this speaker in terms of very clear and plays lower than you're going to be able to play in terms of absolute volume. This will play at a lower volume than the either two, noticeably quieter and retain its clarity. So it plays well at loud and it plays well at minimum volume. I hope you got something out of my video and thank you for watching.
UK